The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the cramped cubicle farm of Morrison and Associates, casting harsh shadows across Daniel Chen's weathered desk. At 32, he had the kind of quiet presence that made him nearly invisible in meetings, a trait that had become both his shield and his curse during his 4 years at the Chicago-based consulting firm. Daniel's fingers moved methodically across his keyboard, each keystroke deliberate and measured, while his colleagues rushed through reports with flashy presentations and buzzword-heavy language. Daniel took his time. Every number was double-checked, every recommendation thoroughly researched, every client proposal crafted with the precision of a master craftsman. "Chen's at it again," whispered Jessica Martinez from the neighboring cubicle, not bothering to lower her voice much. Her manicured nails clicked against her coffee mug as she leaned back in her ergonomic chair. "Still working on the Henderson project? I finished mine 2 days ago." Marcus Thompson, the department's golden boy, swiveled around in his chair with that trademark smirk that had charmed clients and impressed executives since his Harvard MBA days. "Some people just can't keep up with the pace, I guess. Maybe he should consider a career change. Something more. His speed." The comment drew chuckles from the surrounding desks. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he didn't look up from his screen. The Henderson manufacturing analysis required careful attention to their supply chain inefficiencies, and rushing through it would do the client a disservice. He'd seen too many of his colleagues' hasty recommendations fall apart in implementation, leaving clients frustrated and trust broken. The Chicago skyline stretched endlessly beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, Lake Michigan glittering in the distance under the October afternoon sun. Daniel often found himself staring out at the city during his lunch breaks, watching the steady flow of people moving with purpose along Michigan Avenue. Everyone seemed to know where they were going, moving with the kind of confidence that had always eluded him in corporate settings. Daniel. The sharp voice belonged to Richard Hawkins, the department director whose presence could silence a room in seconds. His expensive suit and perpetually furrowed brow had become synonymous with quarterly reviews and performance evaluations. "My office. Now." The walk to Hawkins's corner office felt like a death march. Daniel's colleagues watched with barely concealed curiosity as he passed their desks, some offering sympathetic glances, while others seemed to relish the drama unfolding. Hawkins closed the door with deliberate slowness before settling behind his mahogany desk. The office walls were adorned with awards and photos of Hawkins shaking hands with various corporate executives, a shrine to professional achievement that served as a constant reminder of the hierarchy. "Daniel, we need to talk about your productivity." Hawkins picked up a manila folder, Daniel's name printed neatly on the tab. "Your work quality is adequate, but in this business, adequate isn't enough. Speed matters. Client responsiveness matters. While you're perfectionist, your reports, competitors are winning contracts." Daniel shifted in his chair, the leather creaking softly. "Sir, I believe thorough analysis prevents costly mistakes. The Brennan Industries project was 3 weeks late." Hawkins interrupted, his voice rising slightly. "Yes, it was comprehensive. Yes, it eventually saved them money, but they almost canceled the contract because of delays. Time is money, Daniel. Something you seem to struggle understanding." The familiar knot formed in Daniel's stomach, the same feeling he'd experienced throughout school when teachers praised his work but questioned his pace, during job interviews where his thoughtful responses were met with impatience, in performance reviews where attention to detail was somehow framed as a weakness rather than a strength. "I understand your concerns," Daniel said carefully, choosing his words with the same precision he applied to his work. "But rushing through complex analyses can lead to oversights. The pharmaceutical client last quarter, that's exactly my point." Hawkins leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "While you were being thorough, Thompson closed 2 additional deals. Jessica brought in 3 new clients. The pharmaceutical project, while successful, took resources away from other opportunities." Daniel felt heat rising in his cheeks. He thought about the countless hours he'd spent researching pharmaceutical regulations, identifying compliance issues that could have resulted in millions in fines. Thompson's projects, while numerous, had needed significant revisions during implementation. Jessica's new clients had unrealistic expectations set by her overly optimistic timelines. "I'm not firing you," Hawkins continued, his tone softening slightly, though whether from genuine concern or HR protocol was unclear. "But things need to change. We're implementing new productivity metrics. Faster turnaround times, more client touches, less perfectionism." Outside Hawkins's office, the usual afternoon energy buzzed through the workspace. Phones rang constantly, keyboards clattered, and conversations blended into a steady hum of corporate activity. Daniel walked back to his desk, feeling like he was moving underwater, everything around him sharp and vivid, while he remained somehow separate from it all. His computer screen still displayed the Henderson manufacturing analysis, 17 pages of detailed recommendations that could revolutionize their operations. Every suggestion was backed by data, every projection carefully modeled, every risk assessment thoroughly evaluated. It was the kind of work he was proud of, the kind that actually helped businesses transform rather than just meet quarterly targets. "Rough meeting?" Jessica asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Daniel nodded absently, settling back into his chair. The late afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the office floor. Soon the evening shift would begin. The cleaning crews, security guards, and the handful of employees who stayed late to catch up or get ahead. As his colleagues began their end-of-day rituals, saving files, clearing desks, making dinner plans, Daniel remained focused on his screen. The Henderson project deserved his best work, regardless of arbitrary timelines or productivity metrics. In a world obsessed with speed, he remained committed to substance. He had no way of knowing that his meticulous approach to this seemingly routine project would soon catch the attention of someone far beyond Richard Hawkins's sphere of influence, someone who valued precision over pace and depth over velocity. The Henderson manufacturing report lay completed on Daniel's desk, like a masterpiece nobody wanted to admire. 3 weeks of meticulous research had produced a comprehensive analysis that identified 2.3 million in potential savings and outlined a complete operational overhaul. Yet as Daniel prepared to submit it through the company's standard channels, he couldn't shake the feeling that it would disappear into the corporate machinery like so many of his previous efforts. The Chicago morning brought with it the familiar symphony of urban life, car horns echoing off skyscrapers, the distant rumble of the L train, and the steady stream of coffee-clutching professionals hurrying along the sidewalks below. Daniel arrived at Morrison & Associates 30 minutes before his official start time, a habit that had earned him neither recognition nor ridicule, just the quiet satisfaction of beginning each day with purpose. "Still beating the sunrise, Chen," called out Maria Santos, one of the night security guards finishing her shift. Unlike his daytime colleagues, Maria had always treated Daniel with genuine warmth. During his late-night work sessions, they'd shared countless brief conversations about family, dreams, and the peculiar rhythms of corporate life. "Habit, I suppose," Daniel replied, managing a tired smile. "Though I'm starting to wonder if anyone notices the early bird catching the worm." Maria paused at the elevator, her weathered face showing the wisdom that came from decades of watching office dynamics from the periphery. "Mijo, I've seen a lot of people come and go in this building. The ones who show up just to be seen, they never last. But the ones who show up because they care about the work, that's different. That gets noticed by the people who matter." Her words lingered in Daniel's mind as he settled into his cubicle and opened the Henderson file one final time. The analysis was more than numbers and recommendations. It was a roadmap for transformation that could revitalize a struggling manufacturing company and preserve hundreds of jobs in the process. Richard Hawkins arrived precisely at 9, his daily routine as predictable as the morning traffic patterns. Within minutes, Daniel received the expected email requesting all pending reports be submitted immediately for client distribution. The message carried Hawkins's signature blend of urgency and thinly veiled impatience. Daniel attached the Henderson report and clicked send, watching the email disappear into the digital void. In his 4 years at the firm, he'd submitted dozens of analyses through the same process, comprehensive documents that were typically skimmed, summarized, and stripped of their nuanced recommendations before reaching clients. The morning progressed with its usual rhythm of meetings, phone calls, and the constant chatter of his colleagues discussing their latest achievements. Marcus Thompson regaled anyone within earshot about his weekend golf outing with a potential client, while Jessica Martinez showcased her new presentation slides featuring eye-catching graphics and minimal supporting data. "Daniel, still working on that manufacturing thing?" Thompson asked during the mid-morning coffee break, his tone carrying that familiar mixture of condescension and feigned interest. "Seems like a pretty straightforward case. Cut costs, streamline operations, boom, done." "Manufacturing operations are rarely straightforward," Daniel replied, stirring his coffee slowly. Henderson's challenges stem from legacy systems and outdated supply chain management. The solutions require careful implementation over 18 months, not quick fixes. Thompson's laugh echoed across the break room. 18 months? By then they'll have found another consulting firm. You've got to learn to prioritize speed over perfection, buddy. That's how you get ahead in this business. The conversation was interrupted by an unusual commotion near the reception area. Voices carried across the office floor. Not the typical client meeting murmur, but something different, more urgent, more serious. Sarah Kim, the firm's managing partner, appeared at the elevator bank, accompanied by two individuals Daniel didn't recognize. One was an older man in an impeccably tailored suit, his silver hair and confident bearing suggesting executive leadership. The other was a younger woman carrying a leather portfolio and taking notes with the efficiency of someone accustomed to high-stakes meetings. "That's Robert Henderson," whispered Jessica, suddenly appearing at Daniel's elbow, as in Henderson Manufacturing. "What's he doing here?" Daniel felt his stomach drop. Henderson Manufacturing wasn't just any client. It was one of the firm's most important accounts, representing significant revenue and prestige. If there were problems with the analysis, if his methodical approach had somehow missed a critical element, the consequences could be severe. The group disappeared into the main conference room, and within minutes, word spread through the office grapevine that an emergency client meeting was underway. Daniel returned to his desk, trying to focus on other projects while his mind raced through every detail of the Henderson report. Had he been too thorough, too cautious? Had his conservative projections undersold the potential benefits? An hour passed before Sarah Kim emerged from the conference room, her expression unreadable as she walked directly toward Daniel's cubicle. The office fell silent. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Phone calls were hurriedly concluded, and even the perpetual hum of the copy machine seemed to quiet in anticipation. "Daniel," Sarah said, her voice carrying across the suddenly still workspace. "Mr. Henderson would like to speak with you." The walk to the conference room felt surreal, as if Daniel were watching someone else's life unfold from a distance. His colleagues' faces blurred past, some showing concern, others barely concealed curiosity, and a few displaying the kind of schadenfreude that thrived in competitive environments. Inside the conference room, Robert Henderson sat at the head of the polished table. The Henderson Manufacturing report opened before him. Pages were marked with handwritten notes, and colored tabs indicated sections of particular interest. His assistant continued taking notes while Sarah Kim closed the door behind them. "Mr. Chen," Henderson began, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to boardroom command, "we need to discuss your analysis of our operations." Daniel's mouth went dry. This was it, the moment when his careful, methodical approach would finally be exposed as inadequate for the real world of business. When his colleagues' criticisms about being too slow, too perfectionist, too out of touch with modern consulting practices would be vindicated. But as Henderson leaned forward, something unexpected happened. A smile began to form at the corners of his mouth. "This is the most comprehensive operational analysis I've seen in 25 years of business." Robert Henderson's words hung in the conference room air, like smoke from an expensive cigar, dense and impossible to ignore. Daniel felt his world tilt slightly, as if the gravitational pull of his professional reality had suddenly shifted directions. The man sitting across from him, worth an estimated $50 million according to Forbes, with manufacturing operations spanning 3 states, was praising the very approach that had made Daniel a pariah in his own office. 25 years, Henderson repeated, his weathered fingers tracing the margins of Daniel's report, where he'd made extensive handwritten notes. I've paid consulting firms hundreds of thousands of dollars for analyses that barely scratched the surface of our real operational challenges. This, he tapped the document firmly, this actually understands our business. Sarah Kim shifted uncomfortably in her seat, clearly recalibrating her assessment of both the situation and Daniel himself. Her usual corporate composure showed hairline cracks as she processed the implications of Henderson's endorsement. Mr. Henderson, we're certainly pleased that Daniel's work meets your standards. The entire team contributed. No. Henderson's interruption was polite but definitive. I've read enough consulting reports to know the difference between committee work and individual brilliance. This bears the hallmarks of one person's vision, someone who took the time to understand not just our numbers, but our culture, our history, and our people. Daniel found his voice, though it emerged rougher than intended. Sir, I spent considerable time researching your company's evolution since 1987. The transition from family ownership to public trading, the 2008 recession adaptations, the supply chain disruptions during the pandemic, they all informed the current operational challenges. Henderson's assistant, who Daniel now noticed, wore a discreet name tag reading Jennifer Walsh, Executive Assistant, looked up from her note-taking with genuine interest. Mr. Henderson, should I schedule the implementation meeting for next week? Actually, Henderson said, his eyes never leaving Daniel's face, I'd like to discuss something else first. Daniel, what do you know about executive consulting positions? The question landed like a physical blow. Daniel glanced at Sarah Kim, whose carefully maintained poker face had developed a slight twitch near her left eye. Executive consulting was the promised land of their industry. Direct relationships with C-suite executives, 6-figure project fees, and the kind of professional respect that had always seemed impossibly distant from his cubicle existence. I'm familiar with the concept, Daniel replied carefully, though my experience has been primarily in departmental analysis and mid-level operational consulting. Henderson chuckled, a sound that seemed to come from genuine amusement rather than condescension. Let me tell you something about experience, son. I've worked with executive consultants from McKinsey, Bain, and Boston Consulting Group. Ivy League credentials, impressive client lists, and presentation skills that could sell ice to Eskimos. But you know what most of them lack? Daniel waited, acutely aware that Sarah Kim was taking mental notes of every word exchanged. They lacked the patience to truly understand a business before trying to fix it, Henderson continued. Your report doesn't just identify problems, it explains why those problems exist, how they developed over time, and why previous solutions failed. That kind of insight doesn't come from speed or flashy presentations. It comes from caring enough to dig deep. Through the conference room's glass walls, Daniel could see his colleagues attempting to appear busy, while obviously straining to observe the meeting. Marcus Thompson had positioned himself at the printer, feeding the same document through multiple times while craning his neck toward the conference room. Jessica Martinez had abandoned all pretense of subtlety, standing directly outside with a coffee cup she'd been nursing for 20 minutes. The manufacturing sector is evolving rapidly, Henderson said, opening his portfolio to reveal additional documents. Automation, supply chain optimization, sustainability requirements. Companies like mine need advisors who understand that real transformation takes time and precision. We can't afford consultants who prioritize billing hours over genuine solutions. Jennifer Walsh slid a business card across the table to Daniel. The heavy cardstock bore Henderson's company logo and contact information. But more importantly, it represented a direct line to the kind of opportunity that typically required years of networking and political maneuvering within consulting hierarchies. I'd like you to consider a proposal, Henderson said. Henderson Manufacturing is planning a comprehensive operational overhaul based on your recommendations. Rather than working through Morrison & Associates' standard consulting arrangement, I want to offer you a direct consulting contract. 6 months, full implementation oversight, compensation that reflects the value you're bringing to the table. Sarah Kim's composure finally cracked entirely. Mr. Henderson, I'm sure we can discuss modified arrangements that work within our existing partnership structure. Daniel is certainly one of our valued team members, but he's being wasted here," Henderson interrupted, his tone sharpening slightly. "I've been in business long enough to recognize talent when I see it, and I've also been around long enough to spot environments that don't appreciate what they have." The conference room fell silent except for the ambient noise of the office beyond. Keyboards clicking, phones ringing, and the general hum of corporate activity. Daniel felt as if he was standing at the edge of a cliff, with Henderson's offer representing either a leap toward professional fulfillment or a potentially career-ending mistake. "I would need time to consider," Daniel began. "Of course," Henderson said, standing and extending his hand. "But don't take too long. Companies that understand the value of thorough analysis are rare, and consultants who provide it are even rarer. This industry needs more people who care about substance over style." As Henderson and his assistant prepared to leave, he paused at the conference room door. "Daniel, let me ask you something. When you were working on our analysis, did it feel like work to you?" The question caught Daniel off guard. He thought about the late nights spent researching Henderson's supply chain partners, the weekends he'd spent analyzing industry trends, the genuine excitement he'd felt when discovering the connection between their inventory management issues and customer satisfaction metrics. "No, sir," Daniel replied honestly. It felt like solving a puzzle that mattered. Henderson smiled, the first completely genuine expression Daniel had seen from him. "That's how I knew." The Morrison & Associates office had never felt smaller than it did in the 48 hours following Robert Henderson's visit. Daniel sat at his familiar desk, the same fluorescent lights humming overhead, but everything had fundamentally changed. Henderson's business card lay next to his keyboard like a talisman, a tangible reminder that his methodical approach, dismissed for so long as a liability, had finally been recognized as an asset. The Chicago autumn had settled into its rhythm outside the office windows, leaves swirling along Michigan Avenue in patterns that seemed to mirror Daniel's swirling thoughts. Henderson's offer represented everything he'd dreamed of professionally: direct client relationships, meaningful compensation, and most importantly, the chance to see his recommendations implemented rather than buried in corporate bureaucracy. So, Jessica Martinez appeared at his cubicle with studied casualness, her coffee mug serving as a prop for what was clearly a fishing expedition. "That was quite a meeting yesterday." Henderson seemed impressed. Daniel looked up from his computer screen, where he'd been pretending to work on routine analyses, while his mind wrestled with the decision before him. He appreciated the thoroughness of the report. "Must be nice," Marcus Thompson interjected from his nearby desk, his tone carrying an edge that hadn't been there before Henderson's visit. "Getting special recognition for doing what we all do, though I guess some clients prefer the slower approach." The comment stung, but Daniel found himself responding differently than he would have just days earlier. "Sometimes slow means thorough, Marcus. Sometimes it means the difference between surface-level recommendations and genuine transformation." Thompson's eyebrows rose at Daniel's uncharacteristic assertiveness, but before he could respond, Richard Hawkins appeared at the cubicle cluster with the determined stride of a man on a mission. "Daniel, my office. Now." The walk to Hawkins's corner office felt different this time, less like a death march and more like a chess match where Daniel finally understood the pieces on the board. Hawkins closed the door with his usual deliberate slowness, but his body language suggested barely controlled agitation rather than authoritative calm. "I'll be direct," Hawkins began, settling behind his mahogany desk with less confidence than usual. "Henderson Manufacturing has requested to work exclusively with you on their operational overhaul. They're offering to triple our usual consulting fees, but only if you lead the project." Daniel remained silent, recognizing that Hawkins was still processing the implications of yesterday's meeting. "This is unusual," Hawkins continued, his fingers drumming against the desk surface. "Clients typically work with our account teams, not individual consultants. It creates complications, precedents that could disrupt our standard operating procedures." "What are you saying?" Daniel asked, though he suspected he already knew. "I'm saying this is a tremendous opportunity for the firm," Hawkins replied carefully. "And naturally, We'd want to ensure proper oversight, team integration, management support. You want to assign a project manager, Daniel interrupted, the pieces falling into place. Someone to supervise my work and interface with Henderson. Hawkins' smile was thin and entirely political. Not supervise, collaborate. Someone with more experience in client relations, project management, someone like Marcus Thompson. The silence that followed confirmed Daniel's suspicion. Even in recognition, the firm couldn't resist undermining his autonomy. Henderson's offer had been clear: work with Daniel directly or lose the contract entirely. But Hawkins was already strategizing ways to dilute that directness while capturing the financial benefits. Daniel thought about Maria Santos's words from that morning weeks ago, about people who showed up because they cared about the work. He thought about Henderson's question, did it feel like work? He thought about the Henderson report, still the most satisfying professional accomplishment of his career, and the dozen similar analyses gathering dust in corporate files because their thoroughness made executives uncomfortable. Richard, Daniel said quietly, I'm giving my 2 weeks' notice. The words hung in the air like a challenge thrown down in a medieval duel. Hawkins's face cycled through surprise, confusion, and what looked like genuine panic before settling into practiced corporate neutrality. Daniel, let's not be hasty. If this is about compensation, recognition, project assignments, we can discuss adjustments. The Henderson contract represents significant revenue for the firm. I'm sure we can find an arrangement that works for everyone. It's not about arrangements, Daniel replied, standing from his chair with a certainty that surprised even him. It's about being able to do work that matters without having to justify why thoroughness is valuable or why understanding a client's business is worth the extra time it takes. Through Hawkins' office windows, the Chicago skyline stretched toward Lake Michigan, the same view Daniel had contemplated during countless lunch breaks, while wondering if he'd ever find his place in the corporate ecosystem. Now, looking at those same buildings, he saw possibility rather than barriers. Henderson offered me a direct consulting contract, Daniel continued. 6 months of implementation oversight, working directly with their executive team. Full autonomy over the analytical approach. It's everything I've wanted professionally. Hawkins leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting to something that might have been respect, if not for the circumstances. And if it doesn't work out, consulting is unpredictable, Daniel. Clients can be demanding, unrealistic. You'd be giving up job security, benefits, a proven career track for the chance to do work I believe in, Daniel finished. Yes, I would. 2 weeks later, Daniel Chen cleared out his cubicle while his former colleagues watched with expressions ranging from envy to bewilderment. The personal items that had accumulated over 4 years, a small desk plant, family photos, industry reference books, fit easily into a single cardboard box. Maria Santos appeared at his elbow as he headed toward the elevator bank, her night shift just beginning as his Morrison & Associates career ended. So mijo, off to bigger things. Daniel smiled, the cardboard box feeling lighter than it should have. Different things anyway. We'll see about bigger. Same thing, Maria said with the confidence of someone who'd watched office dynamics for decades. When you do work you care about, it always gets bigger. That's just how these things work. As the elevator doors closed and Daniel descended toward street level, he realized she was right. Henderson's contract was just the beginning. Proof that his methodical approach had value in a world that often prioritized speed over substance. The real transformation wasn't just professional, it was personal. After years of being told he was too slow, he'd finally found a place where thoroughness was recognized as strength rather than weakness. Outside, Chicago's autumn evening embraced him with possibilities as endless as the city skyline.